cause, or some say cosm. Do you hear our prayers? No, we shall not abandon the dream. No one can catch us. No one can stop us now.
Rotting on a bleak gray shoreline, amid heavy rain, murky water, and the ruins of a decayed fishing village, Kos appears in the form of a corpse washed up on the shore, immense, pallid, and strange. A supernatural existence beyond human understanding, a great one. Kos's appearance, together with her death, is profoundly mysterious. Why did Kos appear here? What led to her death? And why is the atmosphere here so saturated with anger, despair, and even longing? Kos, or some say Cosm, is one of the transcendent entities in the Bloodborne universe, a great one. In Japanese, great ones are referred to by a title meaning those on a higher level, implying that they are forms of life that exist on planes of cognition that rise above the plane of existence and thought available to humanity. The power of the great ones does not lie only in physical strength or destructive capacity. Beyond being able to exist across several planes of existence, some great ones also have the ability to warp space, awaken cognition, answer human pleas through spiritual resonance, and at times, influence the course of human evolution. Although each great one seems to possess its own distinctive abilities, their core characteristics can still be summarized in 3 points. First, each great one is a singular individual, existing across multiple planes beyond the reach of human comprehension. The description of the ice root chalice indicates that they can operate on transcendent planes of thought, meaning levels of existence outside the way ordinary people understand the world. Second, great ones are capable of sensing or resonating with humanity on a spiritual level. The moon rune describes them as sympathetic in spirit and is often responding when entreated, even if that response sometimes does not operate in the way the supplicant wishes or cannot be fully understood by humans. Third, great ones do not reproduce through ordinary mechanisms of mating and birth. This does not mean they are wholly infertile. Descriptions related to the umbilical cord of an infant great one show that every great one once had a child. However, for some mysterious reason, all of them lose their child and continually yearn for a surrogate. From this, we may propose a hypothesis. Before becoming the transcendent entities they are now, each great one may have begun as a lower form of existence in the evolutionary process. Through some mechanism, when they ascended to a higher level, they became singular individuals, and at the same time, lost the ordinary reproductive capacity that belonged to their original form of life. One of the endings also shows that a human can ascend into an infant great one. This detail suggests that great one is not necessarily the name of a fixed species or race, but rather a concept referring to forms of life that have reached a transcendent state and exist on a higher level of cognition. From there, great ones reproducing with one another through ordinary means becomes nearly impossible, not only because they are singular individuals, but also because their precursor foundations may differ far too greatly. This understanding is further reinforced when observing the differences among the great ones that have appeared. They differ not only in form and in power, but seemingly also in degree of transcendence. Some great ones, such as Eden, are even so far above the others that he seems to have escaped the physical body entirely, existing only as voice and as idea. This shows that differences among great ones are not only a matter of species, but also of the plane of cognition and existence. Notably, each great one tends to choose a different environment of presence, seemingly related to the traits of what they once were before transcendence. Some are present within a private dimension. Some appear in reality, clinging to towering spires and watching from a state that is nearly invisible. Some exist within the dream realm, the nightmares. In Kos's case, that environment is the deep ocean. This raises the possibility that, before becoming a great one, Kos may have been a form of creature originating from the sea. The brain fluid description states, "In the early days of the healing church, the great ones were linked to the ocean. This understanding may have arisen from early human perception. They viewed great ones as entities from a place that was deep, dark, infinite, and beyond perception. And within their frame of understanding at the time, the closest image to attach to that abyss was the ocean. Or, in my view, this detail may also implicitly suggest that the healing church, from very early on, had witnessed, or at least become aware of Kos's existence beyond the deep sea. From there, it formed the belief that great ones are linked to this environment. One point must be clarified. The physical form of Kos that we witness may only be an incarnated shell that she molded within the plane of reality. Through this shell, Kos can interact, respond, reproduce, intervene, or pursue her own intentions on lower planes. Her true being, or true consciousness, most likely exists on a far higher plane. Within that shell, Kos takes the form of a gigantic marine creature, evoking features of fish while also bearing traits of mollusks. Her body is pallid, soft, and slick, covered with pale blue and white scales. Her limbs are webbed. Her elongated bodily structure, together with a flattened, thin tail, shows many similarities to the oarfish, a creature commonly encountered in the deep seas of Japan, while her enormous size calls to mind a whale. In my view, this design does not seem accidental, but rather a choice made entirely with intention by the creators. It not only serves as an allegory that Kos comes from the deep sea, but also suggests a system of illusions, symbols, and cultural layers, which we will analyze in more detail later. Although Kos appears as an eldritch sea god far beyond human understanding, her body, strangely, still bears a few similarities to humans. She has slender hands and a face that faintly resembles that of a woman with a gentle expression, hidden behind tentacles like hair, making her form less purely monstrous. Kos radiates a very strange grace, almost refined when compared to the image of a mysterious entity beneath the deep sea. Monstrous, but not entirely terrifying. Alien, but not absolutely distant. For some reason, Kos's appearance always suggests that it was designed with intention, as if she deliberately chose this form to ease human fear when facing her out at sea. This form, both strange and familiar, to some extent inadvertently creates an intense pull. It makes us fearful and uneasy, yet at the same time stirs an inexplicable fascination, like when humans stand before the deep ocean, horrified by its infinity, yet unable to look away from the hidden beauty it conceals. This point is not merely personal speculation, because Kos is in fact revered and worshipped by the villagers of the fishing hamlet. This is a coastal community bound to a long history of fishing and seafaring. Here, Kos is worshipped as a sea god, a mother, and the protector of the entire community. The way the fishing hamlet's residents worship Kos recalls, in many respects, the beliefs of coastal communities in Japan and East Asia, where people both fear and depend upon whales, immense sea creatures, and oceanic phenomena that are difficult to explain. From that fear, they build shrines and pray for safety at sea, bountiful catches, and the protection of the ocean. The relationship between Kos and the fishing hamlet appears to carry a similar tone. The villagers worship her because her presence is believed to bring marine bounty, prosperity, and protection on their voyages. However, this relationship may go far beyond the framework of ordinary worship. The evidence is that even after strange changes in the villagers' bodies erupted and led to the village's tragedy, they still prayed to Kos and continued to call her by a deeply maternal title, Mother Kos. That mode of address shows that for the villagers, Kos is not merely a deity who brings prosperity and protection. More than that, her presence also carries the meaning of sheltering and nurturing. Indeed, in my view, Kos may have directly given birth to them, or recreated them in some sense. It is very possible that a genuine maternal bond exists between Kos and this community, a hidden connection cloaked beneath the guise of a covenant, yet expressed directly through flesh, blood, and biological transformation. What makes me particularly confident in this hypothesis is my awareness of The Shadow over Innsmouth, a horror story by H.P. Lovecraft, and in my view, also one of the important inspirations that helped shape the Bloodborne universe in general, and the lore surrounding Kos in particular. The Shadow over Innsmouth is set in a remote port town named Innsmouth, where residents are rumored to have strange appearances, to live in seclusion, and to be connected to a cult that worships ancient sea beings. The story begins when the protagonist, a young man traveling and researching his genealogy, hears about Innsmouth. The town was once a wealthy port, but later declined and was shunned by outsiders. The residents bear unusual traits: bulging eyes, gray skin, wrinkled necks, and strange gaits. The overall impression is called the Innsmouth look. Upon arriving, the protagonist gradually discovers that Innsmouth is not only poor and decayed, but also conceals a horrific secret. In the past, a ship captain named Obed Marsh made a covenant with an ancient sea species called the Deep Ones. In exchange for wealth, seafood, and gold, the people of Innsmouth had to worship them, offer sacrifices, and then gradually marry and breed with them. From there, Innsmouth's residents are no longer purely human. They become hybrid descendants of humans and Deep Ones. When young, they look relatively human, but as they grow older, their bodies change, until they eventually leave the land for the sea to live forever in underwater cities. The middle portion of the story functions as an investigation. The protagonist hears the account of Zadok Allen, an alcoholic old man who reveals the town's horrific history. After that, he is pursued at night by Innsmouth's residents and must find a way to escape the hotel, crossing ruined streets as half-human, half-fish beings gradually reveal themselves. The turning point lies at the end. After escaping Innsmouth, the protagonist continues examining his genealogy and realizes that he too carries Innsmouth blood. He is not only an outsider who accidentally uncovers the secret, but is himself a descendant of the Deep Ones. Gradually, his body begins to change. But rather than only feeling terror, he feels drawn to the sea. In the end, he accepts his fate and dreams of descending into the ocean to live with his true kind. The Shadow over Innsmouth is a story about someone investigating a cursed town, only to discover that what he is pursuing in horror is the very nature flowing in his own blood. The most notable aspect of the work is not only fear of mysterious beings beneath the ocean, but also a deeper horror. Humans may not realize that their own nature has already been and is still being transformed. Set alongside the story of Kos and the fishing hamlet, one can see many striking parallels. Both take place in an isolated coastal community. Both revolve around humans worshipping an ancient entity from the deep sea. Both tie the village's prosperity to an ambiguous covenant. Most importantly, both show bodily transformation not only arising from faith, but originating in a deeper bond within flesh and blood. More notably, humans often do not recognize that transformation, even as it is already happening. For outsiders, it is a horrific spectacle. But for those living within the community, that change may be understood as grace and blessing, as a sign that their God is touching them and paying attention. From this story, my curious mind has long been haunted by a question. If the fishing hamlet residents' transformation truly originates from Kos, then what is the ultimate purpose of that process of hybridization and restructuring? Does Kos do this unintentionally, or is it a deliberate act rooted in some motive? Kos choosing a form that bears many similarities to humans, and at the same time establishing a kind of covenant with the fishing hamlet's residents, suggests that she gives humanity particular attention. It does not rule out the possibility that from the start, humans were the object she aimed toward. Taken together with the patterns in the Shadow over Innsmouth, one can propose the hypothesis that, in exchange for protection and prosperity, Kos established a secret covenant with the villagers. The parasites within her body were bestowed as a kind of blessing, something that not only nourished, but also transformed. It pulled the villagers' bodies beyond human limits, turning them into half-human, half-aquatic beings, more compatible with Kos's environment, and perhaps also closer to the nature of this Great One. So what is the purpose of that act? As previously mentioned, all Great Ones once lost their child and continually yearn for a surrogate. Because they cannot reproduce through ordinary natural mechanisms, instead of giving birth in the familiar biological sense, they often sow a seed into a lower form of life as an intermediary factor. This may be a vessel, a substitute womb, or a special form of union beyond biological norms. Kos does not seem to be an exception. Accordingly, the villager's transformation may be understood as a stage of preparation for a marital partner. Through bestowing blessings, Kos gradually made them more compatible with herself, thereby opening the possibility for this sea god to carry out a form of reproduction in her own way. However, this act may also be seen as a disguised form of inbreeding, because the consort is in fact a hybrid form already transformed by Kos herself. If framed as a biological comparison, inbreeding often brings severe consequences, including risks of congenital deformity, miscarriage, stillbirth, or neonatal death. Therefore, the detail of Kos mysteriously washing ashore, together with the malformed fetus remaining in her womb, may be understood as a consequence of this unstable process. This is further reinforced by a notable detail. The villagers, surprisingly, can absorb and skillfully use the parasites from Kos's body after she washed ashore, while also viewing them as a blessing bestowed by the sea god. This may indicate that they had been blessed by Kos slowly for a very long time beforehand. Therefore, their transformation may not have begun only after Kos appeared on the beach, but may be the result of a quiet process extending across many generations. Their bloodline may have been hybridized and diluted so gradually that they themselves were not aware of the change taking place, similar to how Innsmouth's residents are hybridized in the shadow over Innsmouth. If the story of Kos is truly strongly influenced by the shadow over Innsmouth, then Lovecraft's model may become a key to explaining three major mysteries surrounding her and the fishing hamlet. First, it suggests a way of understanding how Kos could become pregnant. If her relationship with the villagers does not stop at worship, but also includes a process of biological hybridization, then Kos's pregnancy may be the result of an eldritch form of reproduction between a great one and a form of humanity that has been transformed. Second, it explains why the villagers both fail to recognize the horrific nature of the transformation occurring in their own bodies and still call Kos mother. For them, that change may be understood as a blessing, a new bloodline, and a sign of a maternal bond with the sea god. Third, it helps clarify why the orphan of Kos has a form that resembles humanity in an abnormal way. In this reading, the orphan is the trace of a failed crossing between two forms of life belonging to different levels of existence, a great one and transformed humanity. However, it must be emphasized that Kos, using parasites to hybridize and transform the villagers, does not necessarily prove that she is an evil entity. As is known, great ones are sympathetic in spirit. They can sense, resonate, and respond to prayers, as well as to intense emotions. Therefore, it is quite possible that the love and worship the villagers offered Kos were answered by this great one. The issue is that her response does not operate according to human thought or human moral frameworks. Kos may indeed have responded with love, the love of an entity existing on a higher plane, not explainable through ordinary human thinking. Perhaps, for her, the act of restructuring flesh is understood as a form of grace. In this, Kos, in some way, is helping humanity evolve, drawing closer to a higher form of life. Even so, the very act of breeding through a mechanism contrary to nature and becoming pregnant with humanity by deliberate design may not have produced a good outcome for either Kos or the fishing villagers. Because great ones exist on a plane higher than the material world, their offspring are also difficult to nurture and bring to full birth within a body of the physical realm. Joining with a form of humanity already hybridized, which is beyond ordinary biological laws, may become a catalyst that makes this process even more unstable. Kos's body was no longer suited to pregnancy and reproduction in the ordinary sense, and the pressure of that fetus may have caused her body to waste away, collapse, and then wash ashore, leading to her death. From that moment, the greatest tragedy begins, bringing with it the tragedy of the fishing hamlet villagers, the child not yet born, and the hunters who came after. As already noted, the event of Kos washing ashore is especially noteworthy because it contains many similarities to Japanese coastal legends and beliefs, one of the cultures that influenced Bloodborne's symbolic worldview. First is the motif of a beached whale, often called Yori Kujira or Nagare Kujira. In Japanese culture, a whale washed ashore may be seen as a gift from the sea, even as a deity arriving from the ocean. Its meat, oil, bones, and materials can sustain an entire village. Therefore, a beached whale carries both the meaning of material benefit and a sacred quality. Many places establish kujirazuka, whale graves or mounds, to commemorate the whale's life and express gratitude for the gift the sea provides. Similarly, when Kasa's corpse washed ashore, the villagers treated it as a sacred event. They worshipped, revered, and maintained their dependence on the parasites that came from that body. Although this can be seen as an omen of blessing, the shape of Kasa's tail and the posture of her body as it washed ashore still makes me shudder, because it bears too many similarities to the image of an oarfish dying and being thrown onto shore by waves. In Japanese folklore, even to this day, the phenomenon of an oarfish washing ashore is often seen as an omen of disaster, associated with major events such as earthquakes, tsunamis, or volcanic eruptions, or more broadly, a tragedy that may claim many lives. If a beached whale symbolizes a gift from the sea god, then a beached oarfish symbolizes an omen of calamity. Therefore, the event of Kos washing ashore seems to carry both layers of meaning at once, both a blessing from the deep sea and a sign foretelling a horrific tragedy drawing near. The remaining question is, what agent turned blessing into disaster? The key lies in the dual nature of the beached whale motif. Depending on how humans treat it, it can be a blessing, but it can also become a disaster. If villagers honor it, bury it, pray, and give thanks, the whale is the sea's beneficence. But if the corpse is desecrated, dissected, or exploited through greed, that sacred being may become a source of resentment. This layer of meaning becomes even heavier when considering the image of a pregnant mother whale. In some Japanese traditions, if a whale fetus is found within the body of a dead mother whale, that fetus is not treated as an anonymous part of the corpse, but is pitied as a stillborn child. It may be buried, prayed over, and memorialized separately, similar to how humans mourn lives that never reached birth. In this reading, a horrific disaster will descend if anyone commits an act of blasphemy. They violate Kasa's body and strip away the sanctity tied to the child in her womb. And indeed, that is what truly happened.
Mother's dead, her baby taken. Scale the suffering grief of Kos. Do you hear the sealess void? The lair of beasts, the blood-mad roam. Curse the fiends, their children too, and their children forever true.
We know how deeply the people of the fishing hamlet worshipped and revered Mother Kos. Therefore, an act of blasphemy against her could almost certainly not have come from them. The question is, why is the fishing hamlet, once peaceful and prosperous, now nothing but decayed ruins? What happened that left only a small number of transformed residents, day and night, whispering curses aimed at fiends, bitter enough to curse even their children? Ultimately, who are those fiends? Or rather, what power violated the corpse of the sea god, stole the child from her womb, and pushed the entire village to the brink of erasure, leaving only resentment, flesh, and rot?
Bergen what? Blasphemous murderers, blood-crazed fiends. Atonement for the wretches, by the wrath of Mother Kos. Mercy for the poor wizened child. Mercy. Oh, please.
Bergenward is an ancient and mysterious academy led by Master Willem, and it is also the origin point for most of the events that unfold later in Bloodborne. At the beginning, Bergenward was an old place of learning, an academic center with a tradition of researching history and archaeology. Everything changes completely when Bergenward scholars delve deep into the Pthumeru labyrinth, first come into contact with the presence of the Great Ones, encounter the old blood, and face what they call eldritch truth, a form of transcendent truth, a layer of reality capable of warping and collapsing human perception.
Bergenworth is an old place of learning, and the tomb of the gods, carved out below Yharnam, should be familiar to every hunter. Well, once a group of young Bergenworth scholars discovered a holy medium deep within the tomb. This led to the founding of the Healing Church and the establishment of blood healing. In this sense, everything sacred in Yharnam can be traced back to Bergenworth.
Alfred refers to a discovery of pivotal significance. A group of young Bergenward scholars found a holy medium deep within the tomb. That discovery became the starting point for the Healing Church, founded by Lawrence, Willem's student, and for the later tradition of blood healing. However, unlike Lawrence and the Healing Church, which centered its path on blood for healing and enhancement, Bergenward under Master Willem held that what humanity lacked was not blood, but cognition, insight. Willem's ambition goes beyond blood transfusion or physical augmentation. He wanted human cognition to draw nearer to the level of thought of the Great Ones, entities that exist on a plane of awareness far beyond the limits of human intellect. Willem always believed that humanity needed more eyes. Here, eyes is understood both as eyeballs in the physical sense and as a metaphor for insight, the capacity to apprehend layers of truth that ordinary people cannot perceive. Having more eyes means being able to access eldritch truth at a deeper level, understand the Great Ones more clearly, and think on a higher plane. This is partly reflected directly in gameplay, where the insight stat allows the hunter to perceive and witness things that are invisible to ordinary sight, such as hearing the cries of Murgo, a Great One child, or seeing Amygdala, which is always present, clinging to the cathedral and watching us from invisibility. One point must be noted. As insight increases, the character gradually gains knowledge beyond the limits of human understanding. But at the same time, the risk of frenzy also increases when the mind or body cannot endure it. In other words, eyes alone are still not enough for humans to approach the stature of the Great Ones. Their bodies and brains also need to evolve in order to withstand a higher level of thought and cognition. Otherwise, the outcome is often severe madness, the brain going numb while consciousness becomes trapped in a nightmare, as in the case of Mikolash and the Mensis scholars. To serve the goal of seeking eyes, Willem operated Bergenward as an elite research institute. He sent scholars to explore ruins and tombs, collecting specimens and traces related to the Great Ones for study, and at the same time trained outstanding scholars, individuals who were both researchers and a vanguard force for expeditions, the forerunners of the hunters who would come later. However, as stated, researching knowledge that exceeds the limits of understanding always comes with a very high price. The human mind is not designed to stare directly into that layer of reality. Bergenward continually lost scholars in its expeditions. Eldritch truth functioned like a psychological shock, causing many scholars to collapse or go mad after witnessing it. Therefore, when news reached Bergenward of Kos, a mysterious Great One washed up on shore, together with the phenomenon of fishing villagers being transformed. This was almost an opportunity Master Willem could not afford to miss. Almost immediately, he gathered his trusted students and launched a large-scale survey. That very research laid the groundwork for the entire tragedy that would later occur at Fishing Hamlet. As mentioned, Bergenward is the predecessor of the Healing Church. Therefore, the Healing Church's knowledge of Kos most likely originates from Bergenward. More precisely, from the investigation Master Willem organized at the fishing village where Kos's body washed ashore. It was also from what was brought back from the research connected to Kos that the later experiments that took place at Bergenward, and more broadly perhaps within the Healing Church later, were set in motion.
Kos, do you hear our prayers, as you once did for the vacuous Rom? Grant us eyes, grant us eyes. Plant eyes on our brains to cleanse our beastly idiocy.
Mikolash states that Kos once grant eyes to vacuous Rome, an incomplete great one with a spider-like form that hides beneath the lake at Bergenward. If eyes is understood in Bloodborne's language as insight, then this line implies that Rom, before ascending, may have been a lower-order being, then somehow was granted eyes by Kos, and from there evolved into the incomplete Great One it is now. Notably, Rom is closely connected to Master Willem and Bergenward. The Lunarium Key states, in his final years, Master Willem was fond of the lookout and the rocking chair that he kept there for meditation. In the end, it is said, he left his secret with the lake. The detail that Willem left his secret with the lake, together with Rom's existence hidden beneath the lake at Bergenward, brings us to a hypothesis. Rom may not have been directly granted eyes by Kos in a straightforward sense. Instead, it may be the product of an experiment Willem conducted, and the catalyst for that experiment was something connected to Kos, harvested by Willem and his students during the investigation at the fishing village where Kos's body once washed ashore. So the question is, what, in the end, did Willem obtain from Kos? We know Willem always pursued traces of the Great Ones and eyes, and Fishing Hamlet seems to have possessed both. Kos, together with the residents affected and transformed by parasites, became an almost perfect research target for his ambition. But this process could hardly have proceeded smoothly, because it ran into something directly opposed to the scholar's ambition: faith. To the villagers, Kos is a mother, a sacred deity that must not be violated or blasphemed. To the Bergenward scholars, Kos is a research object, a key that could unlock the secret of eyes on the inside, the possibility of cognitive ascension, and the path that would push humanity beyond its own limits. And when faith collides with the ambition for knowledge, when the road to the dream of human evolution is obstructed, humanity can be cast aside, especially when everything is draped in the name of evolution for the common good and the future of humankind. At that point, the only question that remains is, how far will humans go to seize what they desire?
Curse here, curse there, a curse for he and she. Why care? A bottomless curse, a bottomless sea, source of all greatness, all things that be. Listen for the baneful chants. Weep with them as one in trance, and weep with us. Oh, weep with us.
After the scholar's investigation, the village was almost entirely altered, and all that remained was a scene of grief and decay. The curses whispered without end, day and night, by the surviving victims themselves show that the village and its people endured something far too horrific to be called mere research. In that catastrophe, Lady Maria is a particularly notable figure. She is one of the first hunters, and also a member of the group of scholars sent to investigate at Fishing Hamlet. The crucial clue linking Lady Maria to the tragedy at Fishing Hamlet is rakuyo, the famed weapon she once cherished deeply, left beneath a deep well in the fishing village. Rakuyo's description reveals that, at some unknown point, Lady Maria personally threw it down into the well, because she could not bear the horrific memories tied to that weapon. Although there is no information that reveals exactly what Maria did, through her weapon, it can be affirmed that she directly participated in the incident at Fishing Hamlet. A powerful hunter would not discard a weapon she once cherished if it were not bound to an event of overwhelming weight. Therefore, rakuyo functions as evidence of the horrific crime committed by Maria and the scholars, a terrifying memory Maria wished to conceal and bury forever. From the description of a cursed brew and the countless scratches and punctures left behind on the skull, it seems that those who violated the fishing village carried out so many instances of drilling into skulls that it led to the deaths of the residents. This shows that the village was violated in an extreme manner, evidence of the revolting sins of the Bergenword scholars. What was called research was in fact only a veneer concealing crime. In order to seek knowledge, they dissected skulls and forcibly scraped out eyes from within with extreme violence. The brutality was pushed to its absolute limit when they slaughtered without mercy, regardless of whether the victims were men, women, or even children. Among the hunters involved in that incident, besides first hunters such as Lady Maria, one can also name figures tied to Bergenword's ideology, such as Lawrence, Gehrman, Mikolash, and perhaps even Master Willem. However, after the tragedy, it seems that only Gehrman and his student, Lady Maria, later displayed a sense of guilt. The others either appeared indifferent or showed almost no signs of remorse for the crimes they committed. This reflects the dark side of Bergenword. In order to draw nearer to the goal of human evolution, those who bore the name of scholars were willing to carry out large-scale brutality, regardless of the cost in the lives of countless innocents, similar to how Lawrence and the Healing Church later used the old blood to conduct experiments on the scale of the entire city of Yarnum. Notably, if the hunters' crimes had ended with the slaughter of the villagers, then everything might have closed as tragedy alone. Unfortunately, the greed for knowledge is not easily contained. In their intoxication with blood and knowledge, those who claimed the mantle of scholarship touched a taboo, something that should not be, and must never be, violated. The body of Kos, together with the unborn child in her womb. In Willem's eyes, and in the eyes of the scholars, blood, parasites, and even the secret of how a great one produces offspring were a living archive that could not be ignored. But that very way of seeing turned them into blasphemers. Rather than regarding Kos as a sacred being that should be left undisturbed, they treated her as an object to dissect, analyze, sample, and seize. As stated, the detail of Kos washing ashore seems to be inspired by two motifs: an oarfish washing ashore and a pregnant mother whale washing ashore. If the oarfish suggests an omen of tragedy to come, then the pregnant whale carries a dual nature. It can be a blessing, and it can become a calamity if violated in a blasphemous way. Therefore, the moment the Bergenward scholars laid hands upon Kos and her child also meant that they had committed a revolting crime, opening the way for the disaster and the horrific curse that would haunt them afterward.
You're a hunter with your sanity, aren't you? Oh yes, I see. You sense a secret within the nightmare and cannot bear to leave it be, as if the spirit of Bergenworth lives on within you. This is the hunter's nightmare, where hunters end up when drunk with blood. You've seen them before. Aimless, wandering hunters slavering like beasts. This is what the poor fools have to look forward to. Such inquisitive hunters will relish the nightmare. But beware. Secrets are secrets for a reason, and some do not wish to see them uncovered, especially when the secrets are particularly unseemly.
After the tragedy at Fishing Hamlet, a strange curse descended upon the first hunters, and also upon the hunters who succeeded them. Notably, this curse does not function like an illness or an ordinary form of transformation. The description of the eye of a blood-drunk hunter states that when a hunter falls into a blood-drunk state, they will be seized by the hunter's nightmare and wander forever in a hunt without end. The curse forces them to repeat, again and again, the very conduct that corrupted them, killing, losing their way, losing their humanity, and then continuing to hunt and kill within a space that has no stopping point. Simon describes the hunters in the nightmare as slavering like beasts, those who have nearly degenerated into animals. They still carry the weapons and the form of hunters, but the original purpose of the hunt has vanished. Therefore, the blood-drunk state is not merely the exhilaration of combat, but a sign that blood has dominated the hunter to the point that they lose the boundary between hunter and monster, as if the curse is compelling them to reenact an old crime in an endless form.
Oh, please, atonement for the wretches. Lay the curse of blood upon them and their children, and their children's children forevermore.
The Fishing Hamlet priest calls this curse the curse of blood, indicates that it is directly connected to blood, rather than being tied only to the memory or soul of the guilty. The blood that runs through the bodies of hunters ultimately originated in Bergenward's surveys and research, and was later inherited and distributed by the Healing Church in order to create hunters. The fact that the curse descends immediately after the tragedy at Fishing Hamlet and appears to target hunters, or more precisely the blood within their bodies, leads us toward a clear conclusion. What Willem and his disciples brought back from Fishing Hamlet may not have been only knowledge or specimens taken from the villagers. It may have been blood, more specifically, the blood of Kos, which seems to have been brought into the process of extracting, using, and combining it with the old blood taken from ancient tombs, and then passed on to later hunters. This may be why the curse not only clings to the first hunters, but also spreads to their descendants and successors, the innocent and pitiable ones who know nothing of the blasphemous crimes committed by those who came before them.
Maria, she hides the real secret. Please, I need you to do something. This village is the true secret, testament to the old sins. It feeds this hunter's nightmare. Please, bring to an end the horror. So our forefathers sinned. We hunters cannot bear their weight forever. It isn't fair. It just isn't fair.
It is profoundly unfair that the descendants of the first hunters, even though they did not directly stain their hands with the crimes of their forebears, still have to endure torment within nightmares. The cursed and defiled chalice item description states, "Curses are caused by inciting the anger of the Great Ones and used to hex others." This indicates that a curse is born when the anger of the Great Ones is provoked and then used to curse others. When combined with the Great One's trait of being sympathetic in spirit, one can understand the fishing Hamlet curse as forming from two resonant sources. One is the resentment of the villagers, those who begged that the hunters' crimes and even their descendants be punished forever in nightmares. The other is the anger of Kos, a Great One who has lost her physical body and has also had her child, the one she longed for, taken.
Mother's dead, her baby taken. Mother's dead, her baby taken. Scales our suffering grief of Kos. Do you hear the sealess void?
What continually troubles me is that in the fishing villagers' dialogue, Kos's child is spoken of as something that was taken. This wording is quite ambiguous and opens several interpretive paths. First, the scholars may have literally seized the child and carried it away as an experimental specimen. Second, they may have discovered the child in the course of dissection and thereby caused the fetus to die. Third, and in my view more plausible, beyond taking blood from the mother, the hunters may have taken something directly tied to sustaining the child's life, namely the umbilical cord. The reason this hypothesis becomes plausible is that Willem is connected to what is called the umbilical cord, also known as the cord of the eye. Its description reads as follows: a great relic, also known as the cord of the eye. Every infant Great One has this precursor to the umbilical cord. Every Great One loses its child and then yearns for a surrogate, used to gain insight and, so they say, eyes on the inside, although no one remembers what that truly entails. Put simply, the umbilical cord is the umbilical cord of infant Great Ones. Beyond its function of sustaining and providing nourishment to the developing fetus, it can also be seen as a source of insight, something that allows an infant Great One to develop and advance toward a transcendent level of cognition, closer to its parents. This point is further reinforced by the fact that these cords are designed to be covered with eyes, a familiar symbolic image for insight. Therefore, the cord can be regarded as a key, an intermediary object capable of elevating the cognition of a lower form of life to near parity with the Great Ones. And this is precisely what Willem pursued. This becomes even clearer when one of the 4 umbilical cords we can collect in the game has the following description. Provost Willem sought the cord in order to elevate his being and thoughts to those of a Great One, by lining his brain with eyes. The only choice he knew, if man were to ever match their greatness. This detail implicitly confirms that Willem sought, and very likely used, a piece of an umbilical cord in the past, with the belief that it could elevate his cognition in order to approach the Great Ones. The question is, how did Willem come to possess it? When one pieces together past events, from fishing Hamlet, to the tragedy that occurred in the village, to the implications that Kos's child was taken, one can arrive at a reasonable conclusion. The cord that Willem obtained most likely came from Kos's unborn child. As analyzed, a great one's umbilical cord does not serve only a biological function. It is also bound up with insight, serving as a connection between an infant great one and a higher reality. Put simply, it can function as an anchor that allows the child to exist in the physical world while maintaining contact with the transcendent plane. Therefore, when Willem stole the cord from Cos's child, he not only took away the most crucial thing sustaining the life and evolution of a fetus, barely clinging to life in its mother's womb, but also severed the link between Cos, an entity in a higher reality, and her child. In other words, Willem extinguished the orphan of Cos's last chance to live. This explains why the surviving villagers continually mourn that child and call it the poor, wizened child. It also helps explain the atmosphere that now hangs over fishing Hamlet, a sense of anger, despair, and even longing. That may be the mother's emotion at the loss of her child, or it may be the lingering trace of the child itself in its final moment. Let us pause briefly to consider this from a biological perspective. In humans, the umbilical cord is a structure of the fetus, formed from tissues of extra-embryonic origin, and serves as a conduit between the fetus and the placenta. Within the cord, especially in umbilical cord blood, there are many important types of stem cells, usually collected after birth. They have strong proliferative capacity and function as a reserve that supports development and tissue repair, and thus are crucial for development and the maintenance of life. Put simply, the umbilical cord can be seen as a biological resource package for the fetus, both a transport route and a reserve for developmental potential. Therefore, if we compare this to Cos's case, losing the umbilical cord of an infant great one can be understood as losing a necessary condition for ascension and birth to occur fully. In Cos's case, that could lead to her child dying prematurely. More tragically, if the cord also serves as an anchor that allows the child to maintain a link to a higher plane, then when that bridge is cut, the child may not die completely in the sense of ending entirely, but instead becomes stuck on an intermediate plane where the boundary between humans and great ones becomes ambiguous. From there, the resentment of an unfinished death may accumulate, turning the soul of the orphan of Cos into a pitiable and wretched vengeful spirit, existing incompletely, born incompletely, and therefore suffering without an endpoint. The Japanese name of the orphan of Cos means a child left behind after a father or mother dies. This detail not only once again confirms that Cos died before the child was truly born, but also emphasizes the child's present state. An infant great one that has lost its mother, lost its anchor, become trapped, and been left behind as the consequence of a blasphemous act. Although she has died in the physical realm, that does not mean Cos vanished entirely. After the tragedy occurred, she seems to have answered the villagers' pleas and cast a curse upon the perpetrators and upon their descendants as well. This suggests that Cos still exists, perhaps on a higher plane of cognition, while her child, more precisely the remnant of its soul, is trapped within a nightmare with no stopping point, where it must experience the moment of being born and then dying immediately, repeated almost without end. On the side of the hunters and scholars, after that incident, Gehrman and Lady Maria become the two clearest traces of guilt. Gehrman is haunted in his sleep, as if the memory of fishing Hamlet continues to cling to him, even though everything happened long ago. Lady Maria discards Rikuyo and then stands guard at the astral clock tower, which conceals the entrance to Fishing Hamlet. She tends to the patients who have been deformed there, while also keeping secret the fishing village, the place that can lead to the Orphan of Kos. When the player encounters Maria, she sits on an ornate chair, blood spilling from her throat and wrists onto the floor. This detail suggests that Maria very likely sought death because of the haunting and torment of past guilt. Even so, the nightmare and Kos's curse seemingly do not allow those connected to the death of her child to rest. At the moment we confront her, with only one door separating us from the truth, Maria is still there, still holding her role, guarding the secret of Kos's corpse and the tragedy at the fishing village. Maria's action can be understood in two ways. On the one hand, she prevents others from approaching the horrific secret of Fishing Hamlet, keeping the sins of Bergenward and the old hunters from being exposed. On the other hand, it may also be a form of atonement. Maria stands before the door, leading to the place where Kos was desecrated, as if to prevent anyone from further violating the corpse, the child, and the memory of this tragedy. The hunter's nightmare preserves Fishing Hamlet as a space trapped within the curse, where the tragedy of Kos's child and the sins of hunters are continually reenacted in a distorted form. Therefore, our journey carries two meanings at once: to investigate the truth being concealed, and to free that wretched child, as well as the curse haunting the hunters. And the only way to do so is to overcome Maria, defeat the Orphan of Kos, and then release its vengeful spirit from its trapped state within the loop between life and death, thereby in some measure redeeming the mistakes of those who came before. Only when the orphan is freed does Kos's anger subside, bringing with it the dissolution of the hunter's nightmare. From this, one can see that Kos is not a purely evil entity. Her curse begins in anger, but that anger is bound up with loss, desecration, and maternal grief. And when her child is freed, that anger gradually fades. After all of this, Kos seems to have forgiven the immense wrongs humanity committed. As stated, Kos loves humanity in the way she loves her own children. One detail that I still do not have a complete answer for is the moment when the Orphan of Kos is born and reenacted within the nightmare. The orphan crawls directly out of Kos's womb, dragging along her entrails and abdominal cavity, along with something strange connected at the umbilical cord site, which it uses as a weapon in the fight. At the moment it cries upon being born, that sound is almost immediately distorted, shifting from the cry of a newborn infant to the cry of an aged creature. This detail, in my view, surely carries authorial intent. The Fishing Hamlet priest does not describe the orphan as an innocent child, but calls it the poor, wizened child. Even its movements reinforce that impression. When it tries to stand immediately after being born, the orphan staggers, trembles, and even seems to fail for a moment before it can stand. All of this suggests that the orphan is undergoing a process of aging at an abnormal speed. In my view, this may be an allegory for the orphan's short life. Its life seems to have ended at the very moment consciousness first formed within its mother's womb, a premature death, but stretched out and reenacted within the nightmare. More notably, the community has found that the audio data for the orphan's crying seems to be related to Gehrman's crying in a rare line of dialogue. Not only that, after the orphan is freed, the doll delivers a strange line.
"Oh, good hunter, I can hear Gehrman sleeping. On any other night, he'd be restless, but on this night, he sounds so very calm.
Perhaps something has eased his suffering.
This detail may suggest some mysterious connection between Gehrman and Koss's child. Linked with Lady Maria, her role in the DLC, and her relationship with Gehrman, I find it difficult not to think of a strange hypothesis about an entanglement between Koss and these two figures. A hypothesis I will likely spend time analyzing more deeply in another video. It is regrettable that although at first I wanted to make a compilation video on the lore of Koss, in the end it leaned more toward a hypothesis-driven video. Even though there are still many mysteries without answers, perhaps the fact that we know less is exactly what allows the story to open into more interesting perspectives. And in my view, that is also what makes Bloodborne as a whole, and Koss's lore in particular, so compelling. In the end, the conclusion of Koss and the orphan, in some sense within the Bloodborne universe, can be regarded as relatively happy. After countless tragedies, crimes, and resentments, Koss's child is finally able to return to the ocean. Just as the DLC's closing lines describe, a bottomless curse, a bottomless sea, source of all greatness, all things that be.